Just going to David Gruen, looking at the economic indicators at the moment, David, to what extent do those indicators suggest that we do have a problem with this economic integration in terms of being too much a high-cost economy with question marks about our productivity?
Okay, so let me take a step back. There is a sense in which Australia pricing itself out of certain markets was something that needed to happen. I'll explain what I mean, and then I'll try to make sure I'm not misunderstood. The last time we had a terms of trade boom was in the 1970s, and we didn't really understand that it was extremely important that if one part of the economy is white hot, it's extremely important for other parts of the economy not to be doing just normally, because if that happens, you'll blow the top off the economy and you'll end up with inflation at 20%, which is what we did in the 1970s. So macro policy broadly understood, the role of macro policy was to price parts of the economy out of competition, out of markets for some time while the terms of trade went up. So how did that happen? Well, largely it happened by the exchange rate going up as much as it did, and pricing various other parts of the export sector out of markets. As I say, we went through this period with full employment or close to it, by which I mean the lowest sustainable rate of unemployment. And if we hadn't done that, then we would have ended up with a big mess. And it's insufficiently understood just how well the Australian macroeconomy, broadly defined, has dealt with the biggest terms of trade shock in our history. It's extremely rare for countries that have an increase in their exports of 100% to go through that period without much more macroeconomic difficulties than we've had. But a critical part of that was allowing the exchange rate to go up. Now, another element of the rise in costs was something that Marius Kloppers talked about in a speech he gave a couple of months ago, in which he said that the rational thing to do for resource companies faced with these extremely high prices was to get the output and not worry too much about the costs. I'm putting words into his mouth, but I've got the quote in front of me. Now, of course, so I regard this whole period as being a huge success, but it does mean that there are all sorts of firms that have found themselves in serious difficulties because they've been on the receiving end of this. There's no question about that, and it's not pleasant for them, that's true. But now we're in a world where the terms of trade have peaked and are now coming down, and there's a new adjustment that needs to happen, and that's true too. And it may well be that resource companies locked in higher costs in a way that they now have to revisit. That may well be true. But to suggest that we could have got through a shock as big as this without pricing significant parts of the Australian economy out of markets is cloud cuckoo land.